Yay! Everybody give yourself a round of applause. Welcome to Game Jams 101! Yay! A little backstory. This panel was about to not happen, and I was really sad when, because panels was like, no. And then I was like, it should happen. Because making games is fun. Why are you? I'm happy. So thank you, MAGFest, for deciding to let us do this Game Jam talk. Just a little synopsis. So we've done this panel before, and people think it's only about video games, but it's not. You can Game Jam on anything. This weekend is actually Global Game Jam, which is the biggest game creation event in the world. And you can make anything you want. Video games, board games, tabletop RPGs, games you can share with your family, games you can share with your friends. So it's nothing limiting. It's just whatever you can make in 48 hours. And we have a little gif of everyone knows Surgeon Simulator, and it was created in Global Game Jam, and it was created in 48 hours, or at least the first idea. So and there's so many. If you go on Global Game Jam's website, they have an alumni list, so you'll be able to see all the games that are made. It's brought to you by Unity. Quick intro. I'm Kirk. I work at Unity. I'm so happy to sponsor MAGFest this year. So whoever's in here who works for MAGFest, thank you. And then if you scan that QR code, right next door we have the Game Jam Lab and Makerspace East. So after this, if you want to try out some of the stuff that we taught you, it's a tutorial to an online game editor that Unity released called Struct. You don't use any code. There's assets for you to use already. It's drag and drop. And at the end of MAGFest weekend, we're just trying to encourage people to make something and submit their game. So we'll take 30 seconds for people to scan the QR code. And just a happy thank you to MAGFest, because without them, I wouldn't be here. And vice versa. Or I don't know. No. Not the other way. Yeah. Okay, cool. Everyone got the QR code? I see some more cameras. All right, sweet. So to cover what we'll cover, what's happening during this talk, we have a beginner mode. Thank you. You've done this before. I haven't used this presenter view before. So we have a beginner mode and a veteran mode. So maybe show of hands, who has worked on a game before and has done a game jam? Nice. Cool. Who has never done a game jam before and has yay. Okay, cool. This is really exciting. Okay, thank you. So there's going to be two modes for this talk. We have a beginner mode for the lovely people who just raised their hand. And then if you've done multiple jams before, this is a chance to challenge yourself and also be a resource for the beginners who just raised their hand. So we have that. And then who are we? So I introduced myself briefly. I'm Kirk. I'm a senior community manager at Unity. Before this, I was an independent game developer in Richmond, Virginia, and New York City. I don't know how many game jams I've done, but I've definitely had many, and I had a gallbladder attack in Global Game Jam 2015, so I couldn't finish that game. That's my happy game jam story. I'll go here. We'll go to Ruthie.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name's Ruthie Edwards. I'm a UX designer, and I also teach design at the School of Visual Arts. I have done over 40 game jams, which is kind of crazy to me, but I'm addicted to it, and I can't stop. It's the best.
You're addicted to it?
Yeah.
That's a good addiction.
Yeah.
Francisco, hello.
Hi, I'm Francisco González. I'm an indie game developer. I make point-and-click adventure games primarily. There's also a question mark because I don't know how many game jams I've done.
I have a Notion page.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've done Global Game Jam twice. I did a sponsored game jam once with Facebook. But I've also done a lot of little random, I guess, jams. We called them jams before they were jams, sort of thing. I use a program called Adventure Game Studio, and there was a large community forum, and they had a monthly competition where they would give you a theme, and you had a month to make a game based on that theme. So that was essentially a jam. I did that a few times, maybe 3 or 4 times. We did a 2-hour jam once, which was a lot of fun, and maybe I'll talk about that a bit. But yeah, I've done a few jams of varying lengths. and I'm not addicted to it, but I do enjoy doing it. So,
Hi, Tyler.
Hello. So I'm Tyler Rhodes, artist, designer, do animations and things. Done maybe, I don't know, 40, 50 game jams. So it's about over 10 years, but you do 3 or 4 a year, and it adds up in the end. So mostly do Global Game Jam and then one called Ludum Dare, which is like a 48-hour, 72-hour jam. So you make a game real fast, and that's what we'll show you.
Nice. Cool. We've known each other in this panel for many years. This is just a slide of like some of the games that we all worked with together. Heartwarming story. I met you two in 2014 at my second Global Game Jam, and I've known you since then, and you all went to my wedding, and like we've been lifelong friends since.
So game jamming is an amazing way to make friends.
Yeah.
Tyler and I made this very bizarre zoo game at the first Global Game Jam together.
Oh, I forgot about that. Your desktop sounded like it was gonna rocket ship out of the co-working space. I remember that.
These are the days of lugging a desktop computer to the co-working space.
Yeah, and then Ruthie and I see deer in headlight. That's when I introduced you in Francisco in New York City, and you moved to New York, I think.
Yep. So Francisco and I worked on a game called Deer in Headlights. It was another 48-hour Global Game Jam game, but it's more of a narrative. And it won Best Sound Design at our location that we were jamming at.
Yeah.
Wonderful dialogue and music.
And we'll have links to some of these games. I think we have links at the end, so nice.
Yep.
All right, Ruthie, take it away.
So what the heck is a game jam? Veterans, you already know this, but for our beginners, a game jam is an event where you make a video game from scratch. That's the basic gist of it. You can do it solo, you can do it with a group. Usually it has a theme, but that's not a hard constraint.
It's a suggestion.
And it almost always has a time constraint. I think the most frequent one is a 48-hour, because it's kind of easy for people to commit to a weekend, right? Work's over, time to game jam. But there are other jams that are a month long or even longer. So why should you game jam? For both our beginners and our veterans, this is, like we were saying before, an amazing way to make new friends. The game jam community is super collaborative. Everyone's out here to help each other. It kind of has that maker mentality to it. It's a very fast way to learn new things. I didn't know anything about code the first time I went to Global Game Jam. I had never installed Unity. I had never made a game in my life. So that was a very fast way to learn the ropes. You can also finish something quickly. So if you have had issues in the past where you start something and you don't finish it, game jams are great because you can start and finish something in a weekend. I also put improving your soft skills. So that would be collaborating with a team, working on like your project management, your organizational skills, communicating, presenting your game. Maybe your jam site has some presentations, or other types of soft skills. That has been a big one for me. When I started this, I was very shy about my abilities, and now I present at MAGFest, and it's effortless and fun. The most important reason to jam is because it's really cool and really fun to make video games. I think that's pretty obvious.
It's a fun addiction.
Yes. So the prototype for Baba Is You was also a 48-hour game jam game. Lots more tips here. So not only is it the fastest way to get into game development, it has the lowest barrier to entry. So with a game jam, no one's really expecting it to be polished and perfect, so you have a lot of leeway to just go with some creative concepts and maybe don't worry about what it looks like, or don't worry about the controls not being totally worked out. But you can also meet collaborators whose skills complement yours. So if you're an artist, maybe you find coders that you want to work with, and vice versa. And if I was going to say, musicians are always in demand at game jams. I feel like we're always short on musicians. So,
and voiceover actors.
And voiceover, and project managers and people like that. So it's fun to find people who you gel with and whose skills really complement yours. For your veterans, this is an awesome opportunity to build prototypes for full games. So you can take that game afterward and polish it up and release it. So this is a quick way to test concepts with people. It's a quick way to challenge yourself if you're like, hey, I want to experiment with a new engine, or I want to learn this, I want to experiment with Pico 8 or Lua or something. This is a really quick way to get some experience in that. I think it's also important as veterans to be the ones who are coaching newcomers. You can have a whole team of newbies, and you're maybe the lead developer or the lead artist, and then show them the ropes and show them how to do a game jam. That's an awesome opportunity. And you can also quickly build a portfolio that way. Think about if you did 4 game jams a year, now you have 4 games in your portfolio. Very fast way to build that out. So the tips that you came here for, we have them.
The pro tips, brought to you by GamePro. I'm just kidding, GamePro doesn't exist anymore.
Preparing for a jam. So starting your game ahead of time is technically cheating. Game jams usually have that time constraint, right? But you can set yourself up for success with a few tips that we have for you. So first one is to install your software ahead of time. So whether that's your game engine, your IDE, your code editors, whatever you're using to make graphics and audio, make sure you have those installed ahead of time so that you're not wasting time on things like that. Second, you're going to set up your file system, or if you're really good, your version control. A lot of people don't bother with that in a jam, but I know our programmers do love to use it. But if you're working on a team of artists, sometimes it's easier to just do a Google Drive or Dropbox type of thing. So setting all that up, making sure everybody's shared on it, setting up your communication channels with your team, so maybe making a Discord channel, or if you're jamming in real life, I don't know how you set up a real life communication channel.
Well, I was going to say, like, when you go to a game jam, so we're kind of talking about preparation before, but usually like global game jam or something that you go in person, there's a moment when like the organizers put you in teams and like do some community building. I love global game jam because they have like the keynote speakers, and they talk to someone who's like a past participant who's had success on it, or like someone who can give you tips. So when you go to a site, they're usually going to like inspire you, and then they have an exercise like in Richmond, our group is called RVA Game Jams, and we find the veterans, we find the total beginners, and then we find people in between, and then we look for skills, and then we look for who wants to lead a team, and then who wants to like ride along, and that sort of like formation happens too, and that'll be set up for you like in person as well. So doing all of these before you do all of that lets you focus on like meeting new people and forming your team, and kind of like being in the moment to like learn about the theme and like learn about the jam itself. So yeah, so it depends if your jam is an online only jam or if it's an in-person jam, how those team setups work, but ideally you have that set up ahead of time. Totally go to the in-person one, they're awesome.
Yes, we love in-person jams.
All right, it's Tyler's
So
part.
Tyler's going to talk about ideation and theme. So like we said, game jams typically have a theme, and how do you interpret that theme and make something cool out of it?
Yeah, so sometimes the themes are very long and like poetic and hard to nail down. Sometimes they're just like one word, which is probably better.
A rose is thee, and thee is red.
I think our first one was something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, it was like, you see not with your mind, but with your eyes, except when it was like a whole long
It was a whole
thing.
poem, yeah. And then this year, spoiler alert, if you don't want to know, well, it's already out. It's Bubbles. So like, way easier this year for Global Game Jam than when we started, so.
But here's an example from the movie Knives Out. So here's the finished shot, and here was the concept. So your concept doesn't have to be some beautiful, totally finished, polished thing, especially for a game jam where you just straight up don't have time. I do notice that like the indie darling game jammers, they definitely have like all their ducks in a row, kind of what we were talking about earlier. So they'll have everything set up, and it's a well-oiled machine, and they can crank out a super polished thing, but that's like high level.
That's with time,
mode.
yeah.
Most stuff looks like this.
Yeah,
Right.
this is normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you should expect it too, because like that's what a game jam is. It's only 48 hours. So.
Yeah, like you won't get at that level unless you've been doing it for whatever 20 years or something.
Yeah.
So here's an example from a game I made.
Look at that bird butt.
Yeah, so I want a bird with a huge butt, and and that was basically it. And then I was like, maybe you can play as an egg. So we drew it on the whiteboard.
What was the theme?
Sacrifices must be made. So I wanted to like push eggs out of a nest as another egg to survive. So this was the concept, and this was the finished piece.
Look at that bird butt.
Yeah, so you can play this online, but you just play as an egg. It's a battle royale. So you're just in the nest. The nest gets smaller. The mama bird sits up and down and pushes you around and just keeps laying more eggs. And if you last, you're fine. If you fall out, you crack open. So, like as you're concepting, like the more time you take, there's definitely a thing with not getting like lost in the weeds of like coming up with, or like as you're making the game. So the more time you take planning it, probably the safer you are like executing it later. So you don't have to like rush into it. And generally the idea is like whatever your first idea is probably pretty weak. So just keep iterating, come up with like a ton of ideas, and probably you'll hit something interesting.
Can I
you
add?
can, yeah,
Oh,
sure.
go ahead.
I was just going to mention the rubber duck idea that programmers like. So the idea of like if you're having a problem, you explain it to a third party, even if it's not a real person, like a rubber duck. And then the idea will come to you, the answer might come to you, because you're basically blocking yourself.
Yeah. And I was going to say, like, a really common thing, I don't know if y'all have seen it at game jams, where at the beginning, after you form your teams, people start ideating. So you'll have something like Figma or like a Word doc or something, and then people start just throwing ideas on the wall. And after a certain point, there's going to be like the one or two strongest idea in your group. And a pro tip for that is, if you're at a game jam and you're not happy with the idea that your team came out, kind of walk around the teams and see like the other ideas that the other teams came up with, because then maybe
And
you could
steal
be like,
them.
Huh? Say what?
I said, and steal them.
And then steal them. No. Like if you love text-based games and then you see another team and they're making like a narrative game, you'd be like, oh, I could do this. Or if you're really into graphics, then you can like help another team. So you don't want to be stuck with an idea you don't like for 2 days and like have to work on it. So
It also helps to, you can play to like the strength of, say like if you have a programmer and they know how to do one thing, it's like don't force them.
yeah, don't force them to do something.
To do like a fighting game or some kind of crazy scheme. So aim for something that excites you, and that you're motivated to do as a beginner. And so if you've done it before, like this is kind of what I was saying with like the veteran guys who've done like 500 game jams for 20 years. They'll try to do something more novel, and it's also like the bragging rights of all your other game jam friends. So try for something that's more original, surprising, and that is where they're like they know what they're doing, so that now they're pushing the envelope of what they can do, because they've got it down pat of like making a platformer. They could do that in 1 hour, and now they have 70 hours to iterate on it.
The last tip there, it says throw away your first 10 ideas. I know that sounds like a lot, but when the theme is something simple, like in Ludum Dare, it might be something like underground. Then you go to play, you have to rate games in order to get reviews. When you go to rate games, all of them are like digging or spelunky, cave, this and that, and it's kind of like, okay, everyone had the same idea.
Yep.
So yeah, throw away your first 10 ideas. That sounds a little nuts, but it will help you find something that's a little more original.
Yeah, so especially in Ludum Dare, you'll definitely get like fatigued basically playing the same game 100 times.
The same digging game.
Yeah, so
Or this year the same bubble game.
yeah, so
Yep.
there'll definitely be like a bubble type thing or lots of popping
Which is
stuff.
fine too. If you want to make that, totally do
Right.
it. But
But-
just like to challenge yourself with like the original idea. It'll help you dig a little bit, yeah.
Right, but you could do like market bubbles or you can get more abstract with the word.
And inspiration can come from anywhere, but I think a good idea too when you're kind of throwing out your ideas is kind of just make a list of just everything randomly. Like when we made Deer in the Headlights, I don't remember what the theme was. I'm still trying to remember what the theme was that year.
No
but
clue.
I feel like it was something to do with family, maybe? I don't know. The point is we came up with the concept right away for this narrative game with deers, and we wrote down as many horrible deer-related puns as we could, which actually shaped the game because the dialogue had a lot of really terrible puns in it, but it helped exactly. Oh dear, yes. I mean, we had like Dear Old Dad as like one of the potential titles because it was a dear father and daughter. Anyway, but like I don't know if any of you saw it was one of the documentaries that they did for Double Fine, where Tim Schafer was showing like his notebooks of just all the random titles that he had written down for like Grim Fandango, and it's one of those iteration things where you just write everything down and then you just throw stuff away and you get the good stuff. So yeah. So when in doubt, puns, but also write down your stuff.
All right.
Scoping too, right?
Yeah, you do scoping.
Unless you want me to.
Yeah, I'll do.
Okay.
Yeah. So then you have to scope your idea with the fun part,
Which is not about the
mouthwash.
but there's a point to be made.
This is a metaphor.
This is
Yes.
a metaphor. Just a warning.
This is not real. It's not in the room with us right now. But yeah, so I feel like scope is the thing that like newbies and veterans you'll build the trap and then walk yourself
Don't make an
into it.
MMO.
Yeah.
Never make an MMO.
Yeah, so I don't know if we're familiar with the term scope, but it means how big is this game? How many levels? How many mechanics? How many characters? All of
How
these
many
things.
puzzles?
How do you measure the scope of the game? Is kind of how big is this game?
Yeah. So you don't want a Costco size scope. You want a travel size scope.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so make your games as small as possible. Ideally, especially because you're on a time crunch. So easy to explain and have like a few mechanics. And so like when I make a game, I usually don't plan like the scope. I just start at this point. So like I will add one mechanic and I'm like, game's done. And then if I have more time, I will add two mechanic. Or like add another graphic. And so you build on the foundation that you have there instead of trying to build the skyscraper all the floors at one time and you're running back and forth.
Can I add a so in the biz, has everyone heard of a game loop before? Raise a hand. Okay, I see a lot of not. Okay, cool. So like you want to think of like this slide as how does your game start and how does it end and how do you get your player to go from the beginning to the end? And the one mechanic is like the thing that, like for Mario, it's running and jumping across the world, right? So you're kind of thinking of Mario at this point when really this is what you're thinking about. Like you have your cube and you have your obstacles, yeah? And a lot of people, when they think about their scope, they kind of go willy-nilly and they think of like the three-eyed fish and the Bowser levels and things. But you want to focus on just the first stage, right? So thinking about scope is really important because if you think of the other things, you get distracted from the base. So
yeah. So I've definitely had teammates where I'm like building out the levels like this, and they're like, "Hold on, I have to record. Like what's my motivation for the main character? I'm gonna go record the dialogue," and I'm like, we don't need that right now.
Yeah.
We need the base
Yeah.
like level of a cube jumping around on the screen.
Yeah. And the fun part about this is exactly how it's done in like AAA and indie and a lot of game studios. Like if you're working for a game studio and you're making a game, there's usually like pre-production and prototyping.
Like gray boxing and
Yeah,
stuff.
gray boxing. So teams are game jamming internally and they're doing really simple like builds with like no graphics and it's just cubes and the bops, I guess is what you would call it. That's the technical term. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is kind of what I was talking about earlier where like scoping around your team will just make things so much easier. But you'll have to kind of know the people's strengths and weaknesses. So, like if someone only does 3D art or whatever, maybe forcing them to do pixel art is going to go badly. And they can learn it, but they're going to be slow compared to how they normally are because you're taking them out of their comfort zone. So yeah, you can list their skills, designing it to fit those skills, and yeah, like doing extra stuff can be extra added on later. Don't try not to make that your core mechanic.
Don't be extra.
So what was the veterans?
I'm just like mimicking your.
Oh yeah. So if you're a veteran, so like when we do game jams a lot, even if it's even if you've only done like maybe one game jam, that's one more than the other people who have done none. So that's where you can be like a team lead and just help everyone else, especially because people get self-conscious, so they won't. They'll start shutting down, or they won't want to add, or they think they can't help. So you have to kind of like shepherd everyone along and push them towards the goal. And yeah, assume you'll do a lot of the work. So also being able to program is usually helpful, because that's the sticking point a lot of the time, where you might end up with 100 artists, but
Yeah,
you have to get
programming
it.
ends
You have to
up
get it
being a
into the
bottleneck.
game.
Yeah. We'll introduce you to like tools that might not need it, but usually you need a little bit. So.
Yeah, so you can use it as a learning opportunity. Kind of what I was just describing before, where like if you're a veteran, you're going to try something new, maybe something a little more flashy, something to show off, and something you haven't done before to iterate on the skills you've honed for a long time. And there's some examples like Godot, pixel art, shaders, maybe going to 3D. A lot of people don't mess with 3D at all because it's just more complicated than a 2D thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people start with too big of a scope as far as their skills and tools. They want to, try their Rust-based 3D roguelike idea with Houdini and multiplayer RPG, blah 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 blah. But now is not the time for that.
Don't do it.
Stick to what you know now if you're a beginner,
Yeah.
and don't try to overextend yourself, because then you won't finish.
Yeah. If you're a veteran, maybe do 1 or 2, but be honest with yourself.
Yeah, so different mechanics that are easy that make a game feel more complete would be like keeping track of high score, and you can store it locally. You don't have to like do an online leaderboard type of thing with your game. And again, yeah, like don't worry about the start and the end of the game. Make the core loop work. Kind of what I was saying, like add 1 mechanic, and as long as you can get to the end of the game, then you start adding in more. So like make Mario jump to the flagpole, and then add in an enemy, and then add in like a sky, and yeah, animation. Usually I do that kind of like last. I make all the artwork and just throw it all in there, and it looks pretty in the last hour or so. Oh yeah, and so as a veteran, clear start and end. You can add a speedrun timer, so people will like. Generally, if you have some kind of competitive something, just beating the game is fun and all, but now people will try to beat the game in 10 seconds, 30 seconds, or
And that's
whatever.
like the biggest wow for a lot of game jams. When people are like, I'm going to beat this as fast as possible. That's like the quickest win sometimes at a game jam.
And
Yeah.
that is where if you have the online leaderboard, people will compete, and you can just sit back and watch.
It doesn't even have to be an online leaderboard. It could be a share button where people can share it on social media or on Discord or whatever. And that's a very easy way without having to set up servers or anything for a leaderboard.
Kind of what I mentioned, where like the veteran might make the game very fast, like in the first day or in the first night. So they pretty much have a complete game, but now they have like 70 hours to make 100 levels or some crazy amount of content, because everything's already there. They know what they're doing, and they can just cram it all in there.
Such a good clip art picture.
Yeah,
Don't
so
do
there
that
are
at a
there are the
game.
scope pitfalls. So time, so time is never on your side. So some jams are longer, like a week, a month, but a lot of them are like 48 hours or something. And so coding always takes a long time depending on what you're doing. Art does too, depending on how fast they are. I feel like a lot of it though is like delegating the task of like what should I be doing right now. Because you can definitely have someone create 1,000 assets, and
Someone who's a project manager is really important in this part.
Yeah, like someone makes 1,000 assets, they don't even end up in the game because there's no time to get them in.
Do you like Kanban boards and calendars and Jira? This part is for you.
So what is the second point?
Oh, the hard gating. So the hard gating is sometimes when you make a game, in many games you lock your next part until you like find the key, or you beat all the enemies, or you solve a puzzle, and sometimes that will like harm the flow of your game, because those are the times when like everything that's really hard to design, or you want a specific outcome to happen, it takes a long time to do that. So when you're designing your games during a game jam, you want to keep it to like one scene, and those games where like everything is just coming in at you. Like you don't have to like unlock the door or like beat all the enemies, right? Like you want to make sure that the players can progress as easily as they can. So when you hard gate people, like you're kind of preventing them to go through the game because you really want them to see your cool idea, when in fact you want them to just enjoy the experience, right? So you'll notice, so the first point is makes testing more difficult. If you pass it to another team and they're like, yep, I'm done after like the first level, and they don't progress through it, then you've hard gated your players. Or the soft locked is, like I said, like they're trying to figure out your really cool idea, but they can't, you know, they don't know why. Like they don't know why you built that thing. It's bad for the players. So
I remember a jam we did where the theme, so like the challenge was your game has to be on one screen. And I was like, that's how all my games are, because I don't know how to make a level 2. But that definitely makes everything easier. Or like not moving the camera at all, things like that. Like locked camera angle, one room, stuff comes to you, you don't have to go to it, that kind of thing.
yeah.
And yeah, story complexity.
I'm talking about story complexity. So depending on the genre you're making, and if you're going to do a game jam, and also depending on the length of the game jam, obviously you can be a little bit more flexible with how complex your story, if you have a story in the game. Again, if you're making like a platformer or something, you don't necessarily have to have a big complex story. But if you're making like a narrative game or a visual novel type thing for your game jam, if you're doing it in like 2 days or 48 hours, obviously you have to throw the scope. You scope it down immensely. You're not going to be able to tell like this super big, fantastical multi-chapter story because you're just not going to have time. If it's more like 2 weeks or a month or something, you might have a little bit more flexibility in that regard. But yeah, I mean, if it's a 48-hour jam, you pretty much have to expect that the complexity of your story is just going to be like, okay, here you are, you're the player, you're here for a reason, let's resolve that. Like, we made, when we did Swamp Stew, the story, the theme was roots, and so the story was just like, you're a guy in a swamp, there's a witch, she's turned you into an animal, you have to collect roots to turn into different animals to turn back into a human. Pretty simple. Like, just simple 3-quest structure, that's it. If we had 2 weeks, we could have maybe, expanded more, like, why is the grandma doing this? What is, whatever. But, yeah, so like, don't spend too long being like, oh my god, what is the player going to get out of this? Because, I mean, ultimately, it's, again, depending on the scope and how long you have to do it, as brief as possible is best.
Then there's the last little point of the new tech of jumping into something you have never seen before is dangerous.
So use like crypto in your games. So do like blockchain.
I mean, people do that, but
yeah, people do that. But if you don't know how to,
I think it means technology that is not familiar to you, not
Yeah.
necessarily technology
Yeah,
that's
dude,
new.
yeah.
It could be a piece of software from the 80s that you haven't used before.
you'll spend most of your time looking at tutorials and getting frustrated. And
if
not,
you're a blockchain expert in this room, I guess like use it. But if you don't know
Yeah.
how to do it,
but yeah, you'll just be spinning your wheels for most of the time.
okay, cool. I think this is my part. So we've been talking about how when you get through your game, one of the bottlenecks is programming. And you might be thinking to yourself as a beginner, like, oh man, I don't know how to program, or I don't know how to work the software. There's like a lot of things that get in the way of picking the tool that you need for your game jam. And this is like a slide to tell you, like, whatever program that you pick, it doesn't really matter. You just want to pick something that you're really comfortable with, and we're all Sonic in this picture. So, or I want to say everyone is Sonic in this picture. So, yeah, how do you choose your engine so you're not, you're setting up for success? Yeah. So I work at Unity, and usually I would say use Unity, or people assume that, but I believe that you should pick the tool that gets your game done. Yeah, please take a picture of this slide. So this is pulled from itch.io's list of most popular game engines, and someone on this panel doesn't like RPG Maker, and you can guess, you take a guess who it is, and that'll be like a side quest for this talk. Yeah, like everything kind of spans the horizon of like beginner friendly to like Unreal Engine that's used for AAA games. And the ones that are starred are the ones that you really want to check out if you've never made a game before. So, for instance, Twine is something that is used in a lot of narrative games. It's a web tool. It's really easy to use. It's like...
It's free.
It's free.
No code or low code.
It's browser-based.
Yeah,
yep.
So very approachable and accessible. So that's why that's got a star. Most of the ones with the star are no code or low code, where you're doing visual coding, like you're dragging and dropping blocks of code rather than writing and having to worry about syntax or learning a new language. The ones with the stars mostly have no code.
Yeah, and then the ones without stars are the most common engines that everyone uses, and it really like goes from... Actually, there's no range in that. It's just like every engine has its strength. Like for instance, Godot's really good at like 2D games. Unreal is like your hyper realistic kind of like 3D based games. Unity is like in the middle. I like to say that Unity is really good at like VR games and the 2D space and like go into web. Pico 8 is this like fantasy console. So you download Pico 8. And this is cool. It pops up, and there's a terminal window, and it's in this ridiculous resolution, and it's kind of like a Game Boy on your desktop. And you make games and you play games in Pico 8, and it's super awesome. And when you share your games, it comes out as a JPEG, and you just share the JPEG with your friend. And then when they pop it into Pico 8, it's like a cartridge for Pico 8. So they're really cool. And then Game Maker is like been around since the Stone Age, and there's been so many awesome games that's been shipped with Game Maker. So all these engines are really great, options for you. And then we have the unconventional ones, and you see PowerPoint and Google Forms in there, and that's not a joke. There's definitely been PowerPoint, Google Forms, and Excel games where I know there's a game where you pretend you're working at your desk, and then when your boss comes in, you like switch it off, and then it looks like it's working. And
Yeah.
I think that's a game.
Can I explain why I put Google Forms on
Yeah,
here?
I'd love to know why.
So even if you've never done programming, you probably know a little bit about logic if you've used a tool like Google Forms. So the way Google Forms works, you create like a survey, but on the back end, you can say if the person chose choice A, send them to this form, and if they chose choice B, send them to this form. So you're already creating if-then statements without having to put any code in. So maybe this would be a cool and interesting way to build a visual novel or text-based, choose your own adventure game. I don't know, but it has that programming logic that I think is really cool.
Can we put a TI-83 as the unconventional engine?
Yes.
Okay, great. That is an
Absolutely.
option.
I'd like to say that I take offense to the fact that Click and Play is listed as vintage kids software. It is vintage and it's software, but it was definitely not just for kids. I did bring a copy, but I was too distracted playing the challenges to remember to bring it, so I apologize. But raise of hands, has anyone used Click and Play? One person. All right, 2 people. So
when I was a kid, because it's a kid's game.
all right, fine. Well, Click and Play, the people who made Click and Play went on to make the Games Factory and Multimedia Fusion, so respect. Anyway, I want to point out that, I'm not just saying this to be a joke, but like something that you can consider with unconventional engines is if you are a veteran and you want to spice things up, maybe think about using a non-conventional engine just to make it interesting. I myself have been tempted to load up Click and Play and try and do a game jam in Click and Play simply for the challenge and the technical limitations. Because it's like, if you only have so much, what can you do with that? And that can be a fun aspect of game jamming as well.
There was a global game jam I did where we did it in Google Slides. So we did like a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire type thing. And so because those are multiple choice, you can do the logic like Ruthie was talking about, and it's very easy. And then I was just slapping huge art or like YouTube videos that were stretched all the way to the canvas or something to make it look better.
And speaking of easy stuff, the lightning bolt in the bottom left, if you scan the QR code earlier, man, I feel like I'm chilling. But it's cool. It's really like
it is cool. It is cool.
So Struct is this thing that I'm showing in Makerspace East, and there's a lot of tools like Struct, but I think Struct is the coolest because it's codeless. Find a thing that it's codeless and it has a ton of assets. And Struct has like dinosaurs and spaceships. There's cars. There's lava. There's like different tile sets, different textures. It takes like a second to get a character controller. You just drag and drop. If you drag in 2-player things, then you have a multiplayer game, like an online multiplayer game. So Struct is really powerful. And then the Discord, so social media bots, Discord actually released like a platform, Discord Games, and their focus is like sharing games with your friends. So thinking about also like how you share your games. Yeah, there's like game jams where you can like get judged, but maybe you just want to like share it with your family, or like you and your friends have an inside joke and you want to make a game about that with the theme. That's also like a great way to like work through your game. So yeah,
we gotta move.
We gotta move.
So creating art, we love to make weird art. So these are 4 games that I have made for game jams. This Pest Quest was the last one I tried out. It's not a game engine, but it's a tool called Spline.design. It's a free 3D editor, 3D modeling tool for the browser, but it has interactive stuff in it. So I said, oh, I think I can make a game in this. But I really enjoyed that process. But it's 3D. I don't usually do 3D. I've done pixel art for just fishing. I've done like hand-painted art for Beeline. A Revenge of Egg had a lot of procedural effects. The lightning had a lot of like vector-based UI.
These are a bunch of games that I made. I usually have stuff flying all over the screen. So the top one was the first maybe game jam I did. So your dodo is getting chased by pigs, but they're just cubes and they're pink, and so you know it's a pig type of situation. And so some of the other ones I spent more time on, so you can see there's more graphics and things are moving. And like the bottom right, there's a lot more, like particle effects and post-processing effects and fancy clouds. And so I worked on that one for like a couple of months or something.
Yeah, so what we would encourage beginners to do is to start really, really simple. See how you can communicate your game with as few details as possible, as few art assets as possible. And start with familiar tools, things that you know. If you're comfortable creating art in Photoshop or on pen and paper, whatever it is, start there, but be open to learning something new. I think it's a little easier to pick up a new art program than it is a new game engine, so be open to learning some new tools and lean on your strengths. For artists, it's really important to check in with your team and ask questions if you're not sure what you should be doing, because like I said, programming is generally the bottleneck where they have a lot of work and the artists are creating lots and lots of beautiful graphics that may not even make it into the game. So make sure you're working with your programmer. Make sure you have your files set up correctly. If they need transparent PNGs or whatever file type they need, that you're setting it up for success. But what if I'm a programmer and I'm not an artist and I don't do art at all? Well, we have some tips for you as well. Start with basic shapes and colors, like squares, triangles, etc. These are examples of programmer art. If you can advance this slide. We have some examples here. Yeah, just one more.
Oh, one more.
Yeah,
Yay.
So these are examples of what we call programmer art. They tend to be like stick figures or basic shapes, the famous Unity skybox with the default cubes and stuff. use it. That's what it's there for. But we'll show you some ways where you can really easily upgrade that. So by using particle effects, you can kind of add some nice flourishes to that. And then also by not using the default color palette. So before you saw a character that was using kind of that Microsoft Paint, like 100% green, 100% blue. Experiment with some colors that are not in the default palette, that aren't like straight up $00000, right? So these are some examples of games that were made by a guy named Moman. I don't know if he's here, but he's a programmer, and he really stretched himself to create interesting art by using a pastel palette and things like that. But you can see all of his artwork is just squares and circles and triangles. So he didn't have to hand draw anything. So don't be intimidated if you are a programmer wanting to do a solo jam. You can make beautiful art with simple shapes as long as you're not using that default color palette.
Just got colors.
Just use better colors. Yeah, look up a color palette generator. Stretch yourself a little bit. For our veterans, use constraints to inspire or challenge yourself. Try something new. Try something that's the opposite of your style. That's something that I really get a kick out of because I tend to draw in a very cute style. But something like Revenge of Egg, where it was very violent and had a lot of lightning and scary things, that was fun to stretch what I know and what I'm capable of. Another fun thing is to emulate a specific era of game art, like Commodore 64, or trying to do a PS1 sort of aesthetic. There's a PS1 jam. If you want to try out that aesthetic, it's really fun. If you're a veteran, you can also act as an art director for the newbies on your team. So you can set a mood board or styles that they can follow. And if you're an artist and you have the luxury of time, you can also stream some of your artwork during the jam. Show yourself drawing or painting or editing your pixel graphics. People love to see that. So I have an example of a game jam that I worked on in 2021 for Global Game Jam. It was a team of 3 people where I was the artist, and then I had a coder and another person doing audio. I tried out a new style that's based on Swiss poster design, so that's like very simple geometric shapes in this kind of primary color palette of red, yellow, blue, and then I added navy, black, and there's a cream color. So it has just 7 colors in the palette and these flat geometric shapes that are almost all like squares and circles and other geometric shapes. But that made it really fast to create the artwork, and it made it also really cohesive. So every screen in the game looks like it relates to the next one.
All right. Yeah, we're not really qualified to talk about this, but here we go anyway. So creating audio. So there's a good chance that you might have an audio person on your team, and if so, that's great. But there also might be the chance that nobody on your team knows much about music or sound effects or has very limited experience in it. But that's fine. Well, I mean, you know, I've done a little bit here and there. So. I see that. So yeah, there's different levels. Obviously, set for the beginners, you know, chiptone, aka SFXR, is that's what that screenshot is. Yes. Yes. Okay. Yeah, just basic sound editing. I think one of the important things, which we have in the veteran tip, one of the most important things if you're going to add sound to your game is don't just find sounds and plunk them in. Try and make them unique. Make them even if you just tweak them slightly. There's a lot of great resources. There's freesound.org. There's actually also a multi-gigabyte sound pack from a company called Sonus, the SONISS. They release a pack every year for GDC, and they're what's the word? They're royalty free. You can use them without having to worry about the copyright or anything. But like if you have, you know, a laser shooting sound for your game, don't just get the generic laser shooting. Like look for something else that's interesting. Go crazy. Add like a lion roar or something. Make it sound interesting, you know. Because adding music and sound effects to your game is obviously going to take it to the next level. And if you have the ability to do that in a little game jam game, it'll be even more impressive, I should say.
I think using ultra generic sound effects instantly makes your game funny, though. So
Well, it depends on the tone you're
Yeah,
going
yeah.
for, yeah. But then that also leads into making your own. Making your own music. Because like if you don't have a musician, you can do it yourself. Sing into your phone. Use GarageBand. Generate music doing Wolfram tones.
Make your sound effects with your
Yeah, do a whole like acapella thing. Yeah.
look at that.
There you go. You did an instant sound effect. Like maybe you learned how to play the recorder when you were in elementary school and you still have that latent talent that you didn't know you had. Bust out the recorder and do a little doo 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 doo, so yeah. Maybe you play the guitar as a hobby and you just kind of want to just do a little strumming thing, Yeah, go for it.
So my first game jam, I didn't know how to code, but I'm a musician, and it was Heartbeat was the year. So I took the guitar case that I had and I stuck the microphone in and I just went boom, 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 and I was like the heartbeat we could speed up and down during the game. And then the music was like really simple, and then the person yelling in the game was like my friend. And he was like, ah! And that's it. And that was the 3 sounds in the game, and it was awesome. So
In my last jam, I sampled my baby daughter. So she's blowing raspberries and going like, and I took those samples and made them like the raspberry sound. When you squish the cockroach, it makes that sound. Yeah.
Yeah, I did a game jam one time in a weekend where we did have a musician, but he decided to challenge himself, and we were at a friend's house. It was just a random, it was a game jam we did for someone who we wanted to make laugh, basically. It wasn't an official thing. Our friend had like this souvenir, like those little guitars you get from just like, I don't know, random tourist shops that are not functional at all, but he somehow got sound out of it, and the whole soundtrack was just like dur, 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 and then just like hitting pots and pans and stuff. So yeah, sky's the limit, and it can add a funny tone as well. If you're a veteran, try a new DAW or tracker. You can use Audacity, you can use Goldwave. Shout out to Goldwave, I love Goldwave. Try a new instrument, like I just said. If you're trained on something, use an instrument you've never played before. That reminds me of the Portland Sinfonia. Do you all know about the Portland Sinfonia? There was Portsmouth Sinfonia.
7 minutes.
Okay, that was I just bring that up because those were people who didn't know how to play the instruments, and they played other instruments, and they made some weird stuff. So try that.
Nice.
all right, this is my part. Okay, building your game. So this is like right now, the panel. You're going to get to the last day. It's like crunch time. There's only 7 minutes left in a jam. So don't wait until the final hour to build your game. We've had a lot of people who like freak out and they just quit the jam in the last 7 minutes because they're like, I can't finish this anymore. But I'm here to say it's okay if you don't finish your game, but just build it at that point and let people play it anyway, because an unfinished game, it's just going to be fun for people because there's still an experience in it. So, and keep building it during the game. So test it like every morning when you walk in, and then test it before you leave, and test it before for lunch, and save. Hit save. Don't let your computer crash when you didn't save. And then user testing.
User testing. So this is really easy to do. You just grab somebody else or send it to your mom or whoever and say, hey, play my game and tell me what you think. It's kind of a nice to have. You don't have to do it, but it can really impact the game's balance. And if people are like, I don't understand what to do, then you need to add a tutorial. So that's a benefit of user testing, is what your game needs to fix. But like I said, it's a nice to have. You're usually running out of time on the last day and don't have time for this, but if you do plan to set aside an hour, it will make your game better.
Yeah, pass it to a team next to you. Okay, so hosting and submitting. There's so many places to submit your games. itch.io is like the most famous platform. Us at Unity, we have Unity Play. Global Game Jam, they have their own like Global Game Jam website. So they start a site, you sign up for the site, and then you upload your games there. So it just like your miles may vary depending on the jam that you sign up for, and just ask the organizers or look at the website. This
is my page for a game I made called This Little Piggy.
This is so cute.
This is a screenshot of the itch.io page, so it has a nice banner. I customized the background. This doesn't take very long to do, but my one weird trick is that I make the title screen and the web page look really nice, and it tricks people into thinking the game is good.
Nice. And also the cool thing about itch.io, you don't have to, but you could ask for money for your game too. people.
Yeah, and if
Yeah.
you can suggest a price. So say, pay what you want, and sometimes people give you $1 for it. It's
Yeah.
nice.
I don't know why this slide is here.
Well, we have more to tell you. We have 5 minutes to do it, so we'll run through these
Okay,
tactical tips really
go.
quickly. So, self-care. So we talk a lot about these 48-hour jams, but
Water.
It's not actually as intense as you think if you take care of yourself. So
Yeah.
drink water, take breaks, eat one meal that isn't pizza.
Don't eat a raw carrot like Moomin.
Yeah, and don't crunch. It's not worth it. Your work is worse when you have not slept.
Yeah.
So you actually lose time by trying to stay awake all night. That's not how pros do it. Pros go to bed.
Don't sleep at the jam site either. Don't feel obligated to think that you have to sleep at the jam site.
Take a shower.
Yeah, take a shower, all of that.
Yeah, finding jams, like where do you find the people that jam? Well, you can find them in person and online. When I met Ruthie and Tyler, it was like on Facebook, and I was like, video game, where? Richmond. And then I found RVA Game Jams, the Global Game Jams came up. There's a lot of in-person sites like colleges, so if you're in this area, George Mason, George Washington, a lot of like the community colleges, they host the sites. There's a few like groups around here like Swamp Goblins and the IGDA groups that like get together and do game jams. Like right now there is IGDA DC that is hosting like their global game jam site right now. So don't be afraid to like just Google or Meetup. And if you're in a new city too, that's the best way to make friends is like trying to find those meetups. Online jams, itch.io jam. There's like 5 or 10 game jams that like happen every day, and this is how their schedule looks like. So it's kind of like if you don't want to do it with people either, like, or if you want to do it online, then there it is. And then just like examples, like Global Game Jam happening right now. Make it Game Next Door, please. And then like Haunted PS1, like the PS1 jam that you're talking about. Ludum Dare, do you know that I found out?
Ludum Dare got canceled this year.
But they're gonna try to do something in lieu of it. But it's like the best quarterly game. They do it 4 times a year.
We need to add to this list the Game Maker's Toolkit Jam because that's becoming one of the biggest in the world. GMTK.
You'll just see that logo and you'll be like, what is up with that?
It's in the summertime?
Yep. Bam. I have no social media, but these people do, so you should totally follow them. And then if you want to look at your slide, if you want to look at these slides online, scan this. And with 3 minutes left, that's the talk. Bam.
Yeah.
Can I add something real quick? For anybody who doesn't want to, like, if you're too intimidated and you don't want to join a jam and you want to try doing it yourself for practice, here's a tip. There is an online video game name generator. If you go there and you generate a video game name, make that game. Make that your game jam. I did that one time with some friends. We got Monty Python's Makeout Mansion, and we made it in 2 hours. It was a 2-hour challenge. We made a little game where you're a lady and you have to make out with all the members of Monty Python.
Yeah.
Wait, we're going to do Q&A, but can I take a picture of the crowd?
Yes,
Is that
please.
cool?
Everyone sit up straight.
Look really serious.
Comb your hair.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, my arm is just at Francisco. 1, 2, 3.
Good job.
Nice.
Okay.
All right, questions. Let's go.
2 minutes.
2-minute questions. All right. All right. I saw the first one right there.
Yeah, so you have to repeat the question.
It was
So
overall.
We have to repeat
Oh,
the
sorry,
question.
sorry. Yes, we mentioned that a game that we had done had won best sound design. The question is, do you remember what aspect of it specifically? Is that right? Right. I believe it was just the award was just overall sound design. But that was deer in the headlights. Ruthie and we worked with 3 other people. One of them was a voice actor. We had a musician as well. So we had the luxury of that. So we were able to add one track. We were able to add voice acting, like it was fully voiced.
Fully voice acted. That is why.
Yeah, that's basically, we had that and a lot of the games didn't. So that's pretty much why we won, because we had sound in our game. So, yeah.
I think we're actually the last talk in here, so we can do a little bit longer. But
Okay.
other question? I think I saw you. Yeah, good.
So if you want to use, say, one of the environments that like where you write code, like what language would you like
It depends on the engine. So the question was if you're gonna choose if you choose a piece of software.
If you're like, yeah, if you're like a language to like,
Yeah.
I don't like to go program that or like C++ generally.
Yeah, so it depends on the question is what programming language will you be using if you're game jamming with a piece of software. So it'll depend on the engine. Unity uses C#. Unreal uses some sort of visual scripting called Blueprint, or
Does it also do C++?
an Unreal version of C++. Yeah.
Godot has GD script, which is really nice.
Yeah, and then there's
Pico
some
8 uses Lua.
Lua,
So they're
yeah.
specific to the engine.
Pico 8. Yeah.
So there's the language is generally specific to the engine. So
Yeah.
pick.
So pick
That
one.
way.
Yeah, if you were gonna pick a tool for yourself, pick like the strongest programming language and then use that.
Roblox is also Lua.
Yeah.
Weird fact.
All right, hands it. Bam! The man standing right there with the glasses. Yes, because it will get you to make a game. Like seriously, that first slide. Oh, this slide right here, where we really mean to slide.
Yeah.
Because what matters like is designing the game, finding the game loop, and then the tool that you use, no matter what programming language, at the end of the game jam, as long as you have a working game, that's all that matters. And then like naturally, like if you use that tool or use another tool like your next game jam, you'll just figure out that like, oh, when you're making your players, you use like these types of data structures and like function calls. And then like when you go from that tool to Unity to another thing, you'll see the same exact code. It's just a different language. So yeah, definitely mean this slide 100%. There's someone with a cool hat in the back right there. Oh yeah, dreams. Yeah. Yeah, Struct.
So the question is, are there any engines similar to Dreams that are kind of locking you into a walled garden of Sony?
Yeah, and I want to say Dreams, I have a colleague in the industry who pitched a game in Dreams and got a deal with Annapurna. So like you can actually use Dreams to like build your games and like move forward with something. But something like, I'm not going to say Roblox because Roblox is really controversial and they do stuff. But like Struct, in Unreal, there's UEFN. You build with the Fortnite engine, which Struct you build with our asset loadout. And then it's like drag and drop, like I said. But then you have the option afterwards with UEFN. There's like a special version of like scripting there. And then in Struct, it's the visual scripting that's built in. And then you can actually kick it over to Unity and export it. And then build on top of what you built in Struct. So I would really suggest using Struct or UEFN as like your engine. So yeah. The person in front of the yeah. Hello. Okay. Okay, so to repeat the question, I don't program, but I can design games and I can like do other things other than programming. Should I partner with someone who's a programmer to get? Is that? Yes, you should 1,000%.
I think that's a really great idea to shadow someone who is a really good programmer for your first jam. That's what I did. So like I said, I came in with an art background, didn't know how to code at all. But at that first jam, I downloaded Unity and I watched this programmer named David create the game. And so I learned really fast by just watching him do it. And then by the next jam, I was more comfortable to go out on my own and start trying to program it myself.
Yeah. You'll see the tip here is like when you start and then you shadow someone, just remember like the different, like when you start designing your mechanics and characters, they'll go into some sort of flow, and just remember how to program or work with you, and then carry that over with you from jam to jam, because it's the same thing. And just make sure to like tighten your process and like bring that to the next programmer, and you become a better designer for your next jam. So yeah, I think it's like, yes, you. I love your house. Yeah, your costume's awesome. Yes. All right, wait. Who hates RPG Maker in this panel? Point.
Yeah.
So do it, Ruthie.
So I had put that slide together. We've done this talk a few times, and I actually saw a game that really surprised me that I really loved. I was mentoring a high school student, and they made a Pokemon fan game in RPG Maker, because there's a huge fan community around these plugins and assets for creating Pokemon fan games in RPG Maker. And the game was fabulous. I loved it. And I was like, oh, okay, you can make cool stuff in it. It's just that a lot of people stick with the default assets, and you see it over and over and over. I think that's what turned me off from it. But once you sort of bend it to do what you want and make a more creative game with your own assets, I think it is a good engine, actually.
Or the reverse. I'm looking at Moment right here. The first game that we made in our like game industry life, we used RPG Maker assets, and then Konami ended up picking up our game, and then we published it on the DS. And it's like, it was a really douchey pitch. It was like, let's make an Eastern RPG with a Western aesthetic. And I was like, y'all picked RPG Maker. What's going on? So, yeah, that face is what. So RPG Maker, that's the thought. Yeah.
That was like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Don't follow that.
Yeah, don't do that. Any more questions? Oh, yeah, in the mask.
Bad. So the question is, network features good or bad?
Ooh.
I would say bad. However, in engines like Struct or I'll say Roblox, they handle all the networking for you. So that's a way to do it very easily if you're like me and you don't know how to set up a database and do like leaderboards on the back end. These tools set up the multiplayer, the leaderboards, the servers, matchmaking, all that stuff for you. So if you have never done multiplayer, these are a good entry point. But maybe you're a very good programmer and you know how to do that. I'd say go for it. I have seen it done, but the scope can get way too big if you have lobbies and matchmaking and blah blah blah.
And again, just to add to that, it depends on how long the game jam is. If it's a 48-hour game jam, no. If it's a week, 2 weeks, maybe. If it's a month, sure. Because as long as it's not the thing you're focusing on and it's going to be taking away from the rest of it, and it's not taking all of your time, then yeah.
I will also say, if you're kind of experienced, make it a network game that you can play locally. Like, for instance, there was a game in our first game jam. Someone made a game about farting in an elevator, and then everyone logged into their phone, and then they were in the elevator, and it was like kind of, and then
It was like a social deception game, almost like an Among Us, but it's like who farted in the elevator.
Yeah, but it was encapsulated in a way where like you don't have to worry about being on the internet and having to route packets or whatever. It's just, oh, is there a lobby? Are there people connected? And then can I send like simple like pieces of data over like the local network? Great. And that's like, but that's like an intermediate / advanced like kind of game idea. I'm looking at Moment just to like confirm. But yeah, like you can do some sort of network game, but don't make it so that it's like a first person shooter with like a leaderboard and like, yeah. Man Glasses, hello. Scratch is awesome.
Yeah, Scratch is an amazing way to get started if you're, like I said, coming from an art background and you don't know how logic works. It's a great way to get in there and experiment and learn, like, if, then, else, like the very basics of code.
You should find not even remakes on Scratch, because the Scratch programming language is Turing complete. So there are 2D games that are remade in Scratch and that are fully functional. It's just a matter of, like, bending it to your will. So
And Struct has a scratch
and-
like.
yeah, and Instruct has, thank you. Well, I mean, yeah, it does. And
It's really similar to Scratch.
yeah, and that's actually like going back to your question about what programming language do you use. You could just start with Scratch. It's a 2D engine, and then it's all blocks. It's still the same logic. It still has the same functionality, but you're not having to worry about C#, C++. It's just much more visual, much more simpler. So yeah, Scratch is amazing. It's an amazing tool. Any other question? Oh, second question. Oh, free sound. What is it called again?
Question
Most-
is, what are the most generic?
Well, where do you
sound
find
effects? Where do you find
the most generic?
So
The
Oh,
coin, the coin
well-
pickup, the laser.
So you
pew.
can get like all the Hanna-Barbera sound effects and license them, and it's
Yeah.
not that expensive, and it's all the like classic like people running in place and
Bonk,
slamming into
stuff
walls.
like that.
But they're all things you would recognize because they used them for like 50 years straight or something.
Yeah, I mean, you can get the Wilhelm scream. That's public domain now. But also, yeah, I mean, you don't want. That's the thing is, you can use the generic sound effects, but you don't want to because it makes your game sound cheap. You know, you want to put a little zing to it.
Oh,
Okay.
I have a question for the panel. Aside from the games what other games were made in game jams that you remember? Like I remember Lovers in the Lovers in the Lovers in the Dangerous Space Time, and then Mushroom 11 are the two that stand out of mind.
Very recently, and this is niche because it's point and click, but a very well received point and click adventure that just came out called Locomotive was made as a game jam. And it's I encourage you to check it out if you're a fan of like the classic LucasArts games, because it is very much an homage to that. A little shout out to them. That was a game jam game. That was an adventure game specific jam game.
Any other questions? Oh yeah.
Ah, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Red Ship, Blue Ship. Our
Oh
friend
yeah,
Will's
Red
game.
Ship, Blue
Yeah.
Ship on Steam. You
yeah,
can still
yeah.
buy
So
it.
that's a good example of someone who was in our game jam, made a game in 48 hours, then polished it, released it on Steam.
Yeah.
Showed it here also.
Yeah,
at
it was
MAGFest.
it was in Mivs also.
Yeah.
Um,
Ooh, Tori.
sorry. What's your favorite theme for a game jam?
I never listened to this.
I never listen to it either. I just do whatever I want.
Monty Python's Makeout Mansion. That was my favorite one.
I got yelled at for doing that because we had a guest on stream at Unity, and they're like, if you don't follow the theme, then what is it for? And I was like, it's for free expression. You want to like interpret.
I like the ones that are put a limit on the mechanics, like all on one screen or one button.
Yeah, those are
Um,
cool.
Ludum Dare used to let you opt out of the theme,
Yeah.
and then they changed that.
Yeah. And then Global Game Jam, I love their diversifiers. Like this year we got the sponsor one, and I came up with bring 3 new people together, and then they're like, no, scrap that, come up with something different. And then we came up with connect 3 generations together. So like generations as in like you, your parents and your grandparents, or like
Sonic Generations.
yeah, yeah, like different music. Yeah. No, that's what it said in the.
Oh.
Yeah, that was the last like example. So like aside from themes, I love the diversifiers for Global Game Jam. So, yeah. Anyone else?
Let's hang out and chat.
Yeah, let's jam. Right?
Call it quits.
Bye.
Thank you, friends.
Yay.